I asked you to come and be on this podcast, and I'm really fascinated with your art and how that has evolved since the London bombings in 2005. And you talk about, for those of you who don't know, Gill was a double amputee because she was in the bombings, standing 2 people away, was it, Gill, from a suicide, one person away from the suicide bomber, and the story is incredible. You talk about life number 1 and life number 2. Can you talk a little bit about that, and what do you mean by that? Like, who was Gill before the bombings and who is Gill now? This is REIGNITED, where together we will meet interesting people who have a curious message for the world. They'll tell us about their experiences so that we can all reignite our lives. I'm super excited about our interview today because every time I've heard this person speak, I've taken something away from them, and their messages are so powerful. So I'm super excited to welcome Gill Hicks today. She is She is a thinker, creator, and communicator. So she has an incredible story, and has chosen 3 symbols to sort of introduce herself. So Gill, what did you decide upon, and why did you choose those symbols?
So I must say, Bill, I love this idea of talking around who I am through 3 symbols. And it was actually really hard as a task because there was so much that I thought, but this, but that, but for me it's come down. So I took a while on the exercise, and it's come down to very, very first and foremost, the heart. And the heart, perhaps not for the obvious reason of love being first, but for me, that the heart symbolises absolute life, and how there hasn't been a moment in the last 15 years when losing my life was very real, and a challenge to fight back, to be here, that my heart had stopped for, I'm told, 28 minutes. And now I think I listen to my heartbeat, and I detach from that, almost that I'm, the third person removed, and I listen to my heartbeat with just complete awe that I'm here, that it's still going. So for me, the heart symbolising life, and then, of course, how we've all come to know it, which is love. And I guess if I entwined those 2 things, it would be the importance of having a love for life.
Yeah.
The second symbol is a footprint. I am absolutely fascinated, continuously pondering, filling most of my waking thoughts around what does it mean to leave a footprint when you no longer have feet or legs. And again, for me, being in the position of a double amputee, it really got to me. It really got to me, this idea of loss of connection with the ground, and what that means coming up to me, so to feel that I'm on the ground, and then also what I'm giving the ground back. So this transferal of relationship, what a footprint symbolises. I paint a lot using footprints, and in my painting and artwork, it's absolutely about humanity and I guess the anonymity of who we are as we're standing in a footprint. But I think that the overall resounding personal thing for me is a footprint being a lasting legacy.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
what am I giving? What am I leaving behind? And how is that greater than just an impression on the ground? And then my last symbol, of course, is the beloved paintbrush. And just, wow, what an experience, what a overwhelming, joy is an underrated word, something happens when you're with the canvas. Something just happens. And I love this thing for me that happens is I create the work and then suddenly the work is its own being. And I look at it not as a mother, but I look at it as, wow, and the work then speaks back to me, sometimes in very different ways than I had anticipated when I was creating it. So, a paintbrush, a footprint, and a heart is how I would, the three things that I would use to talk about me.
Yeah, so all very powerful symbols that really introduce you and what you're about, as far as life, love, leaving a mark, and the creativity that's come through.
Yeah.
So I asked you to come and be on this podcast because I'm really fascinated with your art and how that has evolved since the London bombings in 2005. And you talk about, for those of you who don't know, Gill was a double amputee because she was in the bombings, standing 2 people away, was it, Gill, from a suicide, one person away from the suicide bomber, and the story is incredible. You talk about life number 1 and life number 2. Can you talk a little bit about that and what do you mean by that? Like, who was Gill before the bombings and who is Gill now?
It's actually really interesting for me even to reflect upon it because it is like talking about someone whom I've met in the past, some idea of life that is literally a lifetime ago, and yet there are threads of her that have come into my life number 2 that I find actually reassuring and comforting to know that you can go through such extreme trauma and life-changing experience and still have something that's you. And so for me, it's very precious. Those threads that have remained, I hold on to dearly. One of the threads I have to laugh about is, so in my previous life, I worked in architecture and design. I lived a very hard, fast life in London. I spent probably, nearly 24 years, 25 years in London. So I considered myself absolutely a Londoner in an extraordinary time to be there, which was a time of cool Britannia, of Tony Blair coming into office, Oasis, of the whole, the cool British artist moments. It was just extraordinary. Tate Modern, the Design Museum, and I was there, and I remember being a complete workaholic because I had all of these self-imposed ideas, and gosh, Belle, how I wish I could transport back to that moment in my life as this fantastic young person and just say, go on the holiday.
Yeah.
Go do stuff.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Do stuff, because one day you might not have legs, or one day it might just change. Do the stuff. And I just felt so compelled to further my career. It was very much about feeling less than my peers and my counterparts in the UK. And look, I fell into all the traps. I started off in London as that wonderful, the beautiful Adelaide thing of coming from a smaller city where it's still okay to talk to people at bus stops and say good morning. And I was that person, and how quickly you fall into the almost the etiquette, the unwritten etiquette of, you don't talk to people, you don't look at people. And I started smoking not just a couple of cigarettes. I smoked almost 40 a day. I drank a lot of gin. I've always loved Audrey Hepburn, and I used to collect little tiny winkle picker stilettos, and I was tiny, and I was sort of nimble and fast, and I would just, get around and be there in the scene. And I remember trying to give up cigarettes, and I thought, I know, I'll start smoking a pipe. And so I'd be at the front of, because it was still not okay to smoke indoors in that time, and I'd be at the front of the building trying to pack this sort of almost Sherlock Holmes looking contraction. And then I realised, no, this isn't really going to work. So I started smoking cigars, and smoking probably 10 cigars a day, which is, and I think I'm saying all of this because I was the person that wore black with pride because of my profession. And I smoked because I thought that was, what we did. And it's really interesting when you never expect to be in a world event like a terrorist attack. And not saying that being cool is like an immunity or a special power, but it's just you don't think those sorts of things are ever going to happen to you because, hey, it's never you.
So it's like that happens to other people and you're in your bubble when I'm working hard and I'm living the lifestyle.
It's really interesting because I would say that, at 10 to 9 on July the 7th, which was a Thursday in 2005, that to me is the demarcation moment of the absolute end of life as I knew it. And so everything before that was life number one. And the difference when you've lost life, so I would call it a bereavement as such, because I lost a life that I knew. I lost very much a freedom that I took for granted, and a freedom in many ways, a freedom physically, a freedom mentally, sometimes that wonderful blissful state that we can get ourselves into where we do think we're immune from smoking ridiculous amounts of tobacco and whatever. How dare I do that with an arrogance of thinking, well, I'm not going to get lung cancer, so why would I? Or, that person I look at now on many levels and just think, you are an intelligent, educated, professional person. What were you thinking? Wow.
So how did you start life number 2? Like, how did that evolve?
So for me, it was in the carriage, actually. So we were in the carriage for about an hour before rescue could reach us, and I didn't know that I'd lost both of my legs, but this incredible presence for me, and I talk about it in no other way that I've found that life and death presented itself in two opposing voices. And it was death that first came to me in this beautiful female voice, and it said very, very gently, Gill, you've lost both of your legs. You do not want to live like this. Come with me. And it was this sense of death being something alternative, definitely somewhere else, and something that was so unimaginable in its beauty. That's everything that I was feeling. And as I was preparing to say, absolutely, I'm going to come with this beautiful voice, an opposing voice of I call life stepped in, was angry, and it said to me, how dare you? There is so much that you need to do. Doesn't matter whether you have legs, whether you don't have legs, you have got to, step up. And I listened to that, and my whole idea of what it means to be changed in that moment.
Yeah.
Because and I must say it is, and I have to use the word bloody. It is bloody lonely having that knowledge that our lives count so much that we need to contribute.
Yeah.
It's a big thing to emerge from that scene and to have this sense of, so what is it I'm meant to do? What am I meant to be doing?
Yeah.
But to know that there must be something.
Can you explain that loneliness?
Well, it's like living with a perspex shield between you and real life. And it's been very interesting examining this and those feelings I had 15 years ago with what we're currently going through with the pandemic. Because I remember coming out from hospital, and I was in hospital 3.5 months, and a darling friend driving me from the hospital, and watching, life go on as normal on the streets of London, and people having a cigarette and laughing and being on their phones. And I wanted to scream, just to say, but don't you realise, the world's changed. And then I had to sort of take stock to say, no, my world has changed. Their world has kept going.
Yeah.
And the difference now is that our world has changed collectively. And to me, it's like, wow, yes, you all get it now. We all get it. This is huge. Our lives and what we place value on, and it's like everything that I valued. I went back to my office. People were still having the same meeting that they were having 6 months ago.
Yeah.
And I just thought, oh, okay, this is insanity.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
And it's like looking through a different lens. And that's lonely, because it's hard to say to people that were very much in the space where I was in life number one, who haven't had the traumatic severing of that time. It's very hard to be the messenger to say, hey, maybe you should value stuff while you've got it.
Yeah.
Maybe you should value health. Maybe we should move a bit more, or, treasure everything.
Yeah.
That's hard.
Yeah. And it's very hard, isn't it, when you go through such a huge experience and life-changing event, to have other people even remotely understand what has shifted internally for you as well.
Absolutely. And especially when then people will say, oh, it's so inspiring what you've done. No, and it doesn't feel like that at all. It's just, no, I was given something and that was my experience, but actually it's hard pulling it off. It's hard staying connected and true to that experience and batting away all the rubbish that keeps wanting to infiltrate your life.
Yeah.
Because, hey, it's wonderful to even say, oh, look, I'm living back in a suburban setting. I'm blessed to be a mum. We've got this crazy rescue dog. Isn't this all great? Yes, it is. But it's also hard to just say, but I still need to hold true to the magnitude of that gift in a moment between life and death.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things that you set up was Mad for Peace after the bombings. Can you just explain why you would do that?
Well, I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
and I just thought I'd never, again, being in architecture and design, peace wasn't something that entered my realm. It was something I read about, of course, something I'd watched things, something I felt terribly sad for people whose lives were destroyed by war and conflict, but it had nothing to do with me. And I examined the idea of, well, actually, if I felt like that, then perhaps lots of people feel like that. And maybe the idea of doing something within the peace space is where I need to be. And so I sort of was trying different feelers because going back wasn't the option.
Yeah.
So it was going forward, and I thought, well, I don't know what happens in peace, really. And I was quite surprised to find out how, because of the struggle for funding with all the NGOs and things, it was like actually they're all quite at each other. You know, it's quite competitive.
The irony.
Yeah. So, oh dear. But I felt that what I had to say and what I had to communicate was very much about the reality of what had happened in terms of being stripped of an identity and this label that I was given. So for me, it was very much a very tight piece of communication around how powerful it was to be labelled one unknown, estimated female when I was taken to hospital. And to me, that was everything. So it was, how do I communicate that, and why is that important, and how does that work in a backdrop of how we all need to contribute to an idea of what peace actually is. So MAD was an acronym for making a difference, but I also really loved this idea that actually I am a bit mad. You know, it's okay to be angry. Yeah. I'm not, I can be completely void of hatred and bitterness and wanting retribution. That's all good. And I think I've tried to identify why I don't have those feelings. To me, what's come through very strongly is throughout the rescue, throughout my time in hospital, all I felt was this immense love. And that came through my hand being held, my face being stroked, people softly speaking to me, and just this sense of care and love. And that to me, again, made the difference between what am I emerging into, what's my new world. My new world is filled with these amazing people that are loving me. Wow.
So you
took away everything.
You had a different lens again in how you saw that, because I wonder whether other people who had one unknown estimated female would react in a completely different way of, I don't have an identity, but you're seeing it as how wonderful that I wasn't treated any differently, that they actually came back to care.
Yeah, and I felt that that's what I need to talk about. That's what needs to be said. That's what needs to come through in my every piece of communication, of how important it is for us to be grounded and reminded that we are absolutely interconnected and that we are reliant on each other for a sustained life. And every time we see each other as the enemy, as the other, we are destroying that little piece of humanity that is vital for our longevity. Every time we act upon ignorance, upon fear, we are destroying that piece of humanity that's essential for our continuation. And so that to me was loud and clear. And then that's why I felt compelled to go straight to trying to understand the why. Why did this happen? These were, British lads, born, raised in Britain. Why did this happen? And I went to the community up in the north of the UK, Leeds, where 3 of the 4 bombers came from. And again, on this quest of, what is peace? I was very hesitant of the sense of, my God, I don't want to be riding in here as, holier than thou on my horse and saying, oh, it's okay, I'm here. Absolutely not. It was a sense of, how do we change this?
Yeah.
How do we work together to find out what's happened here? And I was, I had very little understanding or knowledge of a different faith. I've always been a very spiritual person, but raised as in a Christian household. But as I said, it's not something that filled my everyday. And so I was fascinated to understand, to say, is what I'm reading, is that what it's about? Is it about all of these things that people think they're getting when they're becoming a suicide bomber? Is it really that ridiculous? And so I went to Leeds and I met with the immediate Muslim community there, who knew these lads who their lives were destroyed by this happening. And there were no words. We just hugged. We just said, what do we do? How do we do this together? And that was, for me, the beginnings of a real sense of peace needs to be where you come together in a really hard time to say, let's put whatever aside, let's face this together and build something together. And so what we ended up doing extraordinarily is I suggested, look, it has to be big. So whatever we do has to be big, and it has to be big in terms of what it means. And it's not only symbolism, it has to really be a project or a piece of work that really gets to people in their hearts. And so I said, well, what if I walked from Leeds down to London? And of course, as a double amputee on prosthetic legs.
So how far is that?
The community said, great, what a great idea. So we created this project called Walk Talk. It was 2007, 2008, so not long after the bombing. And I walked from Leeds to London. I said, this isn't to raise money. I just want people to come and have those difficult conversations with the other. Yeah. Talk it out. Find after a mile that moment where you connect. And it was amazing. But coming back to peace, my memory was people joining the walk. And by the time I'd gone, it took a month on the road, and we went through 22 towns and cities or something. So it's exhausting, And I remember people joining, and we'd set off about 7 a.m. every morning. And by this time, sort of a few weeks in, I was swearing quite a bit, because it was pretty tough. Uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I remember someone saying to me, "Oh, we weren't expecting you to be like this at all. We thought it would be quite a peaceful experience." And I said, well, "This is peace.
Yeah.
Peace is hard.
Yeah.
It's not a soft, touchy. Oh, let's all just." To me, that's not what peace is. Peace is making an absolute choice to say, I value our lives working better together more than I value war and having it torn apart. Yeah. I value, us as a humanity together more than I do the consequences of what being apart is. And that's tough. It's a tough road. And I think coming through that, for me, it was, so really peace is in the doing. And I just felt I don't need to keep talking about peace. It's often a subject, a topic that people have definitely, I can see the shutters going down, and I thought, well, then I'm not doing my job. Yeah. If the shutters are going down, then I'm not getting through to anyone. So I just stopped using the word.
Yeah. And I really love that idea of that peace is hard, that it's not all roses and let's all hold hands together and sing lovely songs and things like that.
I think that's the outcome. And I think the love outcome is when you can hold the hand of a stranger and feel that that's okay, that whatever differences you have are all part of the mix of life.
Yeah.
But we can unite on the things that really bring us together, which is our common humanity. This pandemic is a fantastic example of we are all facing exactly the same threat, and some of us are facing it very differently than others,
Hmm.
purely on where we're based in the world.
Yeah, definitely.
And, again, we can feel the empathy for each other because we understand, hey, we're all isolating. We're all finding new ways to be. But there's still this hierarchy of privilege in the world of some of us are able to isolate and to feel safer than others. But we've still got this one thread that joins us, and it's an extraordinary time in our existence, I think.
Yeah, it is definitely. And what will emerge from this? I know you're talking about emergence in your art at the moment as well. Will be very interesting.
Yeah.
Just before we move on to your art, what did you find the most challenging as far as working with peace? Because you worked with terrorists and, the whole spectrum, and you talk about the fact that there wasn't any anger towards them and things like that. Like, how does that all sit together when you're striving for a message of peace, you're talking with terrorists, and you've had an experience where a suicide bomber has, really impacted your life?
I think because I was so calm within myself and so sure about the insights from my experience, so that I was coming from a place of absolute fact. Somebody detonated a bomb, looking at me, not knowing me, and deciding that I was the enemy and that I was effectively the other, and making his choice based on complete and utter ignorance. Fact. Fact. I've lost my legs. It's been a horrific experience, of a life-changing, completely life-changing one. But how I was brought through that whole experience by a sense of strangers absolutely giving me their love. Again, not knowing who I was, but how that didn't matter one single bit. Didn't matter. All that mattered was that I was a precious human being. Those, to me, are the most valuable set of facts for me to take to a table, to be able to talk to someone who is coming from a place of wanting to be right, feeling they need to justify a righteousness through whatever means. That could be through the power of using the word God, and that's the ultimate justification. But they can't mess with the facts, and it's been incredibly powerful for me to work with young people who have been susceptible to ideas of power and ideas of purpose, and finding their purpose in life by becoming something that they think is a glorious position to hold. And for me to be able to challenge those ideals with the facts and to be completely calm about it. And I've gone into prisons in the UK. I've had people at my home. I've worked extensively with police. And again, it's I think for me in that particular, in countering violent extremism work, it's very hard because you don't have a measure for success. I'm one of many, many influences and many, many people that are trying to sway and turn someone's idea of what is right. And so I will never know what's been a success. I always come back to one lad I was working with in the UK, and he was 15, and he said to me, we were sort of speaking regularly for about 6 months, and at the end of 6 months he said to me, look, I'm going to go back to uni, or I'm going to go to uni, I'm going to, do this, and I'm not going to be an extremist. And I said, oh, that's amazing. Could you maybe just tell me what it is I've said or done that's really helped you? And he said, oh, Nothing really. I just love soccer. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Whatever it takes.
Yes.
But so I think in proportion, it's still it's a very rare occurrence. And I don't say that across the world. I have many friends. It's a harrowing, regular occurrence of violent extremism. But in our lives, it's still a very rare thing to happen, and I think that's a credit to our society, and a credit to all that are doing so much behind the scenes to plant the seeds of doubt and to offer an alternative to a set of ideas. Part of the work I've been exploring with art is just challenging this sense of, I guess, stalemate in a way. Okay. That you can't bomb an idea. This is our whole problem. If we could bomb an idea, then there would be no more wars, surely. Or the tactics of trying to eradicate violent extremism would have already worked. You can't bomb an idea, and we've got to meet ideas with stronger ideas and more persuasive ideas, and that's the environment in which I constantly hover. Of where are the ideas that are challenging destructiveness and anything that's not furthering the growth of humanity.
Yeah, and I think the message and the communication constantly that you talk about as well, and having that intangible ripple effect that you can't quantify, but just speaking your truth and being in what your meaning and purpose is, seems to be what's playing out.
It's tough, from being a professional in life one to now having all of that gone, and just to say, well, maybe what I'm doing is effective, maybe it's not. We've just got to keep going. And I was reminded, I was on a plane going to Karratha, and I was working in Karratha, which is rural. Can I say rural? Well,
sort of
incredible country in Western Australia. Incredible. I was just, wow. It's like you could feel the spirit in the soil. It was just magical land. But I'd never been to Karratha before, and I have troubles flying because if I can't have my prosthetics go to 90-degree angles, so they have to be right out. So any sort of small plane seating is a nightmare for me. Anyway, so there was only little planes that went out to Karratha, and I remember sitting in this small plane, and it was a 2-hour journey, and for the first hour I was just squirming and I guess reassessing. That were my thoughts of just, what am I doing? Maybe I should rethink. Maybe I should just go back to the wonderful worlds of design and just be back to who I was, have a regular pay packet. Wow, that would be amazing, to be on salary. And an hour into the journey, I felt a tap on my shoulder, and this young woman gave me a note. So a complete stranger, she gave me a note, and this note was just, Belle, it was just, I couldn't have written it better myself. It was just extraordinary. And basically it said, thank you for advocating for love and for wanting more than tolerance. So she picked up all of these things. Thank you for asking us to think of peace as a verb and something we do rather than a state of being ideal. Just this note went on, and she just said, I hope you enjoy your time in Karratha. basically thank you for the impact you've given me, you've had on me. Yours truly, and signed it off, Sarah, the girl in 8A.
Yep.
And I was just, wow.
Mm.
So she taught me in that one note, she taught me that actually it really matters what we do and what we say really matters, because someone's always listening and someone's always watching.
Yep.
And we might not always get that feedback that what we're doing is having an impact, but she gave me that incredible gift, and the original is in a frame just at the end of my desk, and I use it as a constant reminder to say it matters. Keep getting up, keep doing the stuff, because someone's listening.
Yeah, definitely. And particularly when you're having a moment of doubt and what am I doing, for it to come forward. We don't know the impact of our words and actually telling people what an impact they have had on our lives. Yeah, definitely. So now you've recently released MAD as music, art and discussion. So do you want to talk a little bit?
Still stay mad. I'm still completely mad. And I just thought, well, actually, again, in a constantly, it's important to be fresh. It's important to keep growing. It's important for me to keep exploring new channels. So for me, everything's about communication.
Yeah.
It's how am I saying it? How am I doing it? And let's just keep trying new things.
Yeah.
And so I thought a lot around MAD and actually, if the shutters are coming down on people when I talk about peace, then if I don't talk about the word peace and I talk about it as something we do, then maybe I can express this through art and through music, and absolutely to have discussions around how we are all contributing to the world in our immediate sense and the world at large.
Yeah.
So music, art, discussion to me was everything.
Yeah, and that sense of you talked about your whole life has been influenced by art and creativity, and that's how you using the symbol to introduce yourself.
So a little story that no one ever knows about really is so all I've ever wanted to do is be an artist right from the word go. And
really,
I remember my mother being brought into primary school, and I had the head teacher there talking to my mum and he said, look, Gill's artwork is quite exceptional. Like, this is what other kids are doing. This is what Gill's doing. So, I'd sort of left stick figures long behind and was doing these extraordinary sort of, Monets or whatever I was doing. And he was basically trying to say to my mum, what is it you would like to do? And my mum, bless her, this darling person, just sort of said, oh, well, that's nice, isn't it? Oh, very good, Gilly. And I just thought the difference in one generation, how I would be with my daughter, if I'd be, right, let's get her to the best art school, prodigy.
Yeah, let's embrace this. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So yes, I it's all I'd ever wanted to do. And my father had said, absolutely not. You'll be, looking for handouts. You'll be hand to mouth. You'll never make a success of anything. You'll never have any money, and absolutely not. And so he squashed all those ideas. So for me, being free and being in that world in London, although I wasn't painting, I was sort of at the periphery of it, and that was kind of, being wicked enough.
Yeah.
But now being able to just be with it, it's just that's where my soul absolutely is.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk about some of your artwork. So, actually, we'll go to music first. So why music? Were you a singer?
So I've always sung.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a jazz person by trade, and when the bombings happened, so it took me a long time. You won't believe it, because the amount of talking I do now, but it took me a long time to learn how to talk. Lost a lot of my hearing. I have a half an eardrum. My lung capacity is greatly reduced, and it took me a long time to learn how to speak again. And with that went the singing. So singing has always been a big part of my life, and I wasn't able to sing. And so I just left music aside and thought, well, I won't hurt myself more by even trying to entertain it. I'll just leave it. I mean, I've sung on records that were released in the UK prior to the bombings. They ended up being dance records that were big in Japan, you know. All of these things I'm telling you, Bill, you know. Yeah, it was a big part of my life. And it was only in 2015, so recently, that a very dear and wonderful friend who's a great musician, Gary Burrows, approached me and he said, look, I've written a song and it's about peace and I'd love you to sing on it. And of course I just, okay. And we went to the studio and I wasn't able to get anything out, and it was really very, very emotional. And I said to him, no, it's there, and I've got to do this. Can I have another chance? He said, okay. So we went back and out it came, and the voice was still there. So we've done some live gigs. So I'm back.
Yeah.
In little doses. So I probably wouldn't be able to do a whole gig now on my own. But it's back, and, you know, wow. So the blogs I write now will always feature some music that I find moving, challenging, and I think it's yet another way to reach the soul.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, it
works on so many levels, doesn't it?
And we don't need to have the same language to hear the same music. So I think there's something very special about it. And for me, being, you know, someone who sings again, it's wow, amazing.
What's it like for you to have your voice back?
I can't begin to tell you how emotional it is. I can start crying right now. Because again, it's one of the things that if it's you, if it's true to you, to who you are, it's like finding yourself over and over and over again, and the familiarity and yet the awkwardness, you know, of being back in a microphone and having an audience and just feeling that, you know, the vulnerability of it all.
Yeah.
And yet vulnerable, and yet the desperate need to get it out. Yeah. You know, really interesting contradiction of emotion. Yeah.
Yeah. And I sort of relate that to, you know, in my rooms with art therapy, quite often people are trying to find that thing and they know it's part of them, but it's blocked and can't quite grasp it. But when they do, it's so liberating. And, you know, quite often in sessions, that's when I get emotional, is when people have, you know, found it and you can see them light
and
up.
Once you've got that lid off, you know, it's like,
yeah, here it is.
Any opportunity. Yeah. All right, Jill, we've heard enough now. Anyway, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Okay.
We could have a sing along. I'll click my fingers or something. And so your art features, you talked about the footprint earlier, and a lot of your art does have some reference to the footprint as well. So do you want to explain, what are you hoping people get from your art when they experience it?
A sense of that we are part of a larger sense of a global idea of who we are. For me, I want to try and impart the feeling I get whenever I'm at the ocean, and that is, when I'm at the ocean, I feel completely insignificant and yet absolutely significant. I feel like I'm telling this majestic body of water my problems, and yet it's sort of washing in and washing out and saying, oh, yes, Jill, yes, I've heard this before, dear. Don't worry. And so it's this sense of being completely insignificant and here for a tiny, tiny fraction of time. So let it go. But whilst you're here, actually one life can make a difference. So it's, again, full of contradiction, full of charge of, you know, what you do matters. Leave a footprint. Leave a footprint that counts.
Yeah, definitely. And that juxtaposition that sits there together. Yeah, definitely. That's really powerful, isn't it?
And some recent work I did was with sand, you know, and again, just amazing. So I've sort of got the actual of sand on canvas, and then we use a wonderful guy, Chris, to do all the print work, and you know, he captures it at this moment, and then I've put the two together to say, well, look, here's gravity just doing its thing, and life's continuing, and here's the sand still falling and changing and morphing into a completely different picture, and then here's the snapshot of the print. And then I make fabrics from those artworks because, again, for me, I'm curious as to if you're wearing something, will that start the conversation? You know, like I have a little scarf here, okay, and this artwork was called Black and White, and it was all around the idea of perhaps, you know, our ideas need to find a middle way. Perhaps we can't have this situation where we're both right. And I was just fascinated that if I was wearing this, does that offer a moment of conversation? If we were at a bus stop and you said to me, oh, that's an interesting scarf, and I was then able to share with you and say, well, yes, this is all about and the story of the art, and how that could be the basis of a really incredible conversation where you move away from talking about the weather and talking about where you both stand. You know, wow. So that was the idea around wearable pieces, and I just then thought, I don't want to stop at scarves. I want to branch out into kimonos. So kimonos will be the hot new thing at Christmas time with the art pieces.
Nice. And I think that symbolism that shines through. So for those of you who are listening and couldn't see what Jill was holding up, it's a black and white scarf and the little footprints on it. And I love that metaphor of black and white. And there was grey there too, wasn't there? Yeah, as well.
Yeah.
So what do you get from creating? Or what does it do for you?
Oh my God, it's like a transcendental experience for me. It's like I crave it. So if I'm not able to get to the studio, I have another studio here at home. And I work from Central Studios in Adelaide. If I'm not able to be with a piece, I get, I won't say cranky. I get sort of displaced. I feel completely displaced. I don't know where to channel the energy, and when I'm working on a piece, I just hear it so loudly in my head of what it is I need to be saying on this canvas, and out it comes, and it's just wow. And then I sit with it, and I let it talk back to me. And it's this complete relationship. It is the most extraordinary experience that is almost indescribable, unless there's something in someone's life where they say, that's how I feel about playing a sport, or that's how I feel when I'm listening to, orchestral music. It's a complete transcendental state of being somewhere else. It just extraordinary, and it's become something that I crave. So it's a real sense of, I want more of that.
So it's part of your being.
Part of my being.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's something with art too. And I know people get scared of art sometimes, but when I work with people through some of their big stuff in their life, the art speaking back to them is so powerful. And, it may seem random, but it's actually not. And we've gone beyond words, but also the fact that it can speak and inform is incredible. Yeah.
And it's almost like it's answering a question that you've posed.
Yes.
And how, because you've answered it yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you've created it. So again, it plays to me. I talk a lot around, everything we need, we already have.
Yeah.
And when you sit with that for a while, that's a very powerful statement, because you can say, well, I don't have this. No, everything we actually need, we already have. And that could also be the ability to ask for help.
Yeah.
It's all there. And so to me, that's what painting almost brings to life, or justifies that statement, is it's answering something that you've asked it, and it's wow, because it's come from you.
Yeah,
you've
definitely
answered your question. Yeah,
definitely. Now, a couple of years ago, you were painted by Ando. So what was it like having your portrait done, being on the other side?
I loved him so much.
Yeah,
so we were together for 5 hours in that session. And I must say, I forgot that it was being filmed. I forgot that this was what we were doing. I was completely raw and in absolute what I thought was a private conversation with Ando. And it's funny watching it back, because I thought, oh, yeah, that's right. Rarely do I cry, and I cried and I laughed and I cried a bit more, and it was one of the most extraordinary interviews I think ever been captured. And then to have this artwork, which now hangs in my home, just wonderful, beautiful. I remember getting the email and just thinking, wow, Ando wants to paint me. How incredible is that? So I'm very grateful for the experience, actually, because it's a capturing of a moment that was really raw and yet beautiful.
Yeah. And so his art's able to express that. But I think he's in my top 3 interviewers, actually, Ando, because he holds an energy in a space and truly listens. Yeah, and he's there with you, and it comes back to that humanity, I think. It's unconditional. Yeah.
And I found that also with Richard Feidler. So I did conversations with Richard Feidler, and same thing, it completely lost in the conversation. And it was his wonderful producer at the time that had to remind us, 30 seconds, quick. and I listened to that back now as well. I just think, we ended it really abruptly, because the conversation was real. And what a gifted I don't want to say interviewer, a gifted person he is, exactly as Arne, of really caring and wanting to know, inquisitive about the person in a beautiful, empathetic way. Yeah, amazing.
In a sense that you talk about your curiosity and just looking at things and trying to work through them. So before we finish, what's your main message for the world? Like when we talk about discussion and speaking.
It's interesting now, because we're all in a space of this COVID-19 pandemic, and I think the message perhaps will be received very differently, because we're all in a very surreal space that no one could have anticipated, that we're all sharing lots of tips of how are you doing, especially for anyone in Australia, anyone out of Australia. It's hilarious that we're all calling it ISO. Only Australia. How are you doing your ISO? But I think for me, it's the greatest realisation for every living person is that we will one day end. And that guarantee of our ending, of our death, should be our greatest motivator. And it should be our greatest motivator to say, what am I doing with my life? What areas am I in love with? What areas do I absolutely hate and need to change? And that we should always have a sense of urgency, because having a guaranteed end means that we don't have a lot of time. Our time is not endless. So I don't want to sound like a cliche. I want this to sound very, very, very real, in that we must live a life that we can reflect upon to say, wow, I'm really pleased with that.
Yeah.
I did a really good job.
Yeah.
I did a really good job while I was here. I've felt pain, and again, I've embraced it all, with even the whole spectrum of feeling, and even feeling pain and discomfort. And I just say, well, that's a signal of being alive. Yeah. How fantastic. And being alive comes with everything. And so it's accepting that, your plate of everything is the absolute payoff for being alive, and for our death and our understanding that we will end, to be our greatest motivator for living a life well lived, and having a sense of, on our end moment, please, if we get that, to have a reflection to say, wow, that was a great ride.
Yeah.
I did that well. Yeah, I did that life well. That to me is and to be able to even talk about that now in this time has released some of that loneliness in that knowledge for me.
So people get some sort of sense of where you're coming from.
I think we've all had a very different experience of fear, of contracting something that may kill us. Fear of if I just go to the supermarket and touch a trolley that someone else has touched, I might get this terrible thing and I might die. And that changes our way of thinking, our way of being, this fear of I may die from something horrific. So I best just stay inside and be safe. That to me is, we're in now a headspace that perhaps we don't normally occupy. And it's to use that mind moment to say, okay, so let's re-examine my life. And hence why I'm sort of, spending a lot of time writing about this idea of emerging, and what do I want to emerge from and into from this period?
Yeah.
And how does that enhance this incredible chance that I've been given back to have a life number two, to have a platform in life number two? Not many people get a chance to be able to share their insights. So I'm always aware and grateful for that. And therefore the insights have to count. I don't want to fill the air with space of nonsense. What comes out of my mouth has to count. So I would say the realisation of our end should be the greatest motivation of our whole life.
Yeah. And that, wow, I lived a life. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I did that.
Yeah. I know I say this a lot with my guests, but I think time just passes when I hear what you've got to say. And I think it's amazing. And it is wow. And I know that there's value in what you've got to say, and finding your voice and using your art as a way to communicate, is really, really powerful. And it is about having those discussions, whether they're hard, easy, living life, all of that together is really, really important. So is there any last parting words that you would like to offer everyone who's listening?
No, I just think, just for those listening to really consider that, everything we need, we already have, and to use this extraordinary time to really dig deep and to find all those incredible things that we have. We are far more capable than we ever give ourselves credit for. And sometimes we don't know how extraordinary we are until we're shoved in a corner and have to get out of that corner. And I think that's what this time is about. This time is about the challenge, and we can do this. And it's that sense of everything you need, you already have.
Yeah, definitely. And live life and use the insights to go back to whatever you need to. Yeah,
absolutely. And change the stuff. You know, as I said, it's a short time. It's a short time, and please don't spend that time with any regrets of, oh, why did I spend 10 years in that job that I hated? You know, that's a decade of this wonderful time that we've been granted here. So it's use it wisely. And as I said, it's easier said than done. I've done it. I've wasted the years, but never again. Yeah.
Thank you, Gill. It's been really insightful and a rich conversation. So thank you.
Beautiful to be with you.
Yes, thank you. For show notes and more information about my guests, and to get in touch with me, visit ignitearttherapies.com.au.